Let's take a close look at the new vintage collection, the Book of Boba Fett Tusken Warrior 3.75-inch action figure, VC279. Villa Varykino, living the Star Wars life. Hello there, and thanks for visiting the Villa Varykino YouTube channel. Today I'm going to take a closer look at a new arrival from Hasbro's The Vintage Collection line, the Tusken Warrior 3.75-inch figure from the Book of Boba Fett. I really enjoyed the Tusken scenes in the show, so of course I really want to be able to fill out a scene with a lot of Tusken warriors for my Book of Boba Fett scene. And of course they have a different style to Tuskens that we have seen in other shows and movies. They have a much more darker style robes and sort of aesthetic to their look, so I can't just fill it out with other Tusken action figures. I'm going to need ones made for the Book of Boba Fett. So of course, starting with the Tusken Warrior, we can see that they have this fabulous black robes with accents. I think it looks fabulous. I really can't wait to open this one up. So we'll take a closer look at the backing card and then get stuck in. We've got this really cool promo art photo of the Tusken Warrior from the show there on the side with a few Tuskens in the background. We have an interesting green color behind the figure and used for that title plaque. Fabulous red logo for the Book of Boba Fett there, and of course the Kenner logo on the front. On the back, we can see some of the other figures from the wave. This one is VC279. We can also see Hunter, Clone Trooper, Cassian, Han Solo, and the Darth Vader Death Star 2. That's a really good figure. If you're keen to see an uncarding of that one, do check out our other videos. I was really quite impressed with how they did that unmasked version of Darth Vader. So taking a look at the front, we can see the figure packaged alongside a gaffy stick, and if you look really closely you can see that there is just a little piece of black fabric trapped there between the bubble and the figure. Now when I was choosing this figure in the store, I knew that I was going to open it, so I knew that wasn't going to be an issue. But if you like to keep your vintage collection figures on their card, do be aware that the fabric of the skirt component of this figure is quite sort of frayed, so that might be an issue that you might want to keep an eye on. It's very small, but just something to be aware of because I can kind of see it moving around. But yeah, not an issue for me, but something to keep an eye on. So let's get stuck in and take this figure off the card and get a closer look. So here we have the figure removed from the bubble and the backing card, so I can get my first-hand look at this really cool figure. So we've got predominantly plastic components at the top, and then for the lower half we have a soft goods skirt here in a black fabric with a raw edge to that bottom hem, which will have little tiny pieces coming off of it, so that if a few of these will come off, that's just going to be sort of part for the sort of tattered look, which I think works for the Tuskens, and is probably going to stand up pretty well even over the long term. It's not going to fray too much unless you're handling it a lot. So I'll take a look at the details and the articulation of this figure, and then take a look at the accessory and some of the poses that we can do with this figure. Starting at the top, we've got a black plastic sort of headpiece here that has long trails down the back, and each one can flex. They're sort of made in a soft rubbery type fabric, so we should be able to move the head around, and those will kind of bend over the shoulder there a little bit. If I turn the head to the side, you can see that. So that is not really impacting the posability of the figure, which I like. In the show, it almost gives an effect of like hair with these long strips of fabric, which I think is a really cool effect. And of course we've got some of those classic Tusken spikes coming out the top there, painted quite tidily in silver here. We've got a very classic Tusken mask to the face with those metal components over the pale and darker brown pieces there, which I think is quite cool. We've also got the sort of breather sitting there on the chest, that sort of cylinder that is attached. But of course on this one we don't see the sort of the straps hanging down because they are underneath this sort of shawl over the shoulder, because of course the Tusken warrior character is portrayed by a female stunt woman, so we can assume to say that this is a female Tusken. And of course she differs a lot to the female Tuskens that we see in Attack of the Clones. This one is more of a warrior than the ones that we sort of see in a little bit more of a caretaker parental role with the young Tuskens in episode 2. So I'm curious to see how this shawl will impact the posability of the arms. We can see that this is it's still flexible rubber, but it's kind of covers the shoulders here. And the split up the side only goes to here. So some of the other characters and figures I've seen that have some sort of plastic shoulder armor, there is a split in the back, or it kind of comes up a little bit further so we can still move the arms up. So I'm curious to see how that will impact. We can see on this side the split is perhaps a little bit wider, perhaps just with the way that the figure's arm is posed while it was packaged. But I'm curious to see how much flex that is going to have when we try out some poses. We've got some plastic sort of fabric components here in a crisscross shape. Kind of reminds me of Rey's costume a little bit there on the front. We have a brown and black belt there with some pouches. Not the tidiest sort of paint. Just a little bit of sort of overlap on some components, very minor though. I did notice that this in particular, this belt section, out of the carded figures that were on the shelf, this was the one that I paid the most close attention to, because there was a little bit of variability with how tidy this belt was. This one was the tidiest out of the one that I could see. But there's just something about the paint on this pouch that just looks like it's a little bit globby. It almost looks like the paint's gone on a little bit thick and hidden some of the sculpting details on that pouch there. The next one along looks a little tidier in terms of showing the detail there, but just a small concern there. We have a section down the front. Now on the backing card we can see that this is where the character has a lot of sorry, I'm trying to pick up the backing card. The character has a lot of beads and sort of detail strung down the front. So for the figure, it is just done in a solid piece of plastic here that is attached to the belt there. So this doesn't have a lot of sort of posability to it or anything like that. It hangs pretty straight, and it's got a little bit of a sort of a plastic fringe here at the front, which looks pretty solid. You know, they got a little bit of flex to them, but they're pretty straight. It almost looks like a sort of a big plastic garden fork down the front. But I think the details on this are pretty well. We do get the impression of shells and beads, and we've got a number of different paint colors here. We've got some pale colors, some silver, some dark brown against the black. So I think for the scale that works pretty well there. And I'll try and put some closer up photos so you can see the fine detail of that panel, because I think it is very distinctive for this character. It is obviously one of the hallmarks of her costume, so I think that is quite a nice rendition there for this figure. Moving down, we've got some pale Tusken wrapped boots that stop just above the ankle, and we've got some black boots underneath. I'm going to be careful about this skirt. I'm going to try not to rough it up too much, but I will try and check out the articulation and posing underneath. So let's check out some of the articulation. As I tested before, we've got pretty good movement with the head there. We can do pretty side to side and a little bit of up and down and all that. So the shoulder piece, it's hard to really see without being quite rough to the character how much flexibility we're going to have with this shoulder piece. It feels like it's sitting on the shoulders. We can kind of move it around a little bit, okay, but the head, the helmet part around the head does stop it from coming up sort of higher to sort of get it out of the way to move those arms. So let's see what we can get with the arms. Okay, because of where that plastic hits, this is about as high as I'm going to get with the arm at the side, and that's pretty much just straight out. Before I feel like I risk doing damage or possibly splitting at the top of that side gap there. So to the front, I think we're going to have a similar experience with the range of motion. Again, I get to about there in the front, and you can see how wide that is split there. So we're not going to get in over the head, sort of a New Hope Tusken holding the gaffy stick moment with this particular figure. I think the best you'll get is kind of posing the arm like that, unless you're going to be a little bit rougher with your figures than I'm brave enough to be with the poses there because of this plastic cape. I was kind of curious. I was wondering whether they would do this in a fabric so that we could get a full range of motion there. I do think the plastic allows for some very fine detail. There is sort of like ridges on both the costume and this here, which I think would be very hard to do in a small scale with fabric. So I do understand why they would have done it. I'm sure they might have tested it to see whether it could have been done, but I think it looks tidy, even if we do get a limited range of motion for it. So pretty much going to be the same thing on the other side. We've got, it really does stop at that sort of parallel with the shoulders there, just straight across. But we've got some pretty good, I must say the forearms on this figure are quite small. It's quite interesting. With the scale of, you know, I'm used to sort of unboxing recent figures like Darth Vader and Clone Troopers, the more armored characters. Her forearms feel quite slender to me compared with some of the other recent TVC figures. And we can see that her hand is, it's got an interesting, we can see the sort of the pin hinging there on the hand. It's very small and it's solidly black, so I'm afraid that the details might show up as clearly as I can see them on the camera. But we can see the way that that hand moves. So we've got sort of like a bit of a click that we can rotate that the hand in there. And we've got a little bit of rotation there as well. Kind of stiff, but it's there, so I can rotate the hand around and do weird poses there as well. And same sort of thing on the other side. Nice easy joints at the elbow. I like that, not too stiff. And we can see the posing that we can get there with the hand at that wrist there. And different, slightly different hand poses, I think. Not the same. Couldn't quite tell from the angles. We've got sort of a grip that's going to be able to hold the gaffy stick, and one finger pointed out just slightly. I thought we'd have more of a just sort of a classic grip, but we've got the sort of pointed finger out, which almost looks a little bit like a trigger finger here, but she only comes with that one gaffy stick staff weapon. So let's have a look at the waist. Nice clean movement at the waist. I like that. Nice and easy. Now the bit that I'm worried about, pulling this back and seeing what's underneath. So it looks like we've got just a little bit of a seam in the front of the skirt, looking underneath here, which helps give it shape. We've got some seams at the side, and we can see that we have pretty standard articulation under the robe here. Very classic style articulation for the hips, but as I was afraid of, the belt really does stop. I'm not getting much movement at all. I'm getting to about there and it really just wants to stop, and it's not really holding the pose. That is about as far down as the character is kind of wanting to sit. You can see if I try and push, those legs are just not bending. And I think a little bit, it's because of the solidness of this plastic piece in the front. It's just really, it's hitting the front of the legs and they're just not posing. So not too much there. This character does not have a seam on the upper thigh. Sorry, I gotta get the camera to focus on this black. We can move the legs out to the side, so we can do a kick like that. But we don't have an upper thigh seam. We've got a little bit of sort of a interesting rotation here. But it's interesting that I can't move the legs forward. So we've got a lot of movement to the back. And if I sort of rotate that joint around, get a little bit more to the back, I can sort of kick to the back with it, but not a lot to the front. And we've got nice sculpted joint at the knee that hides pretty well with the sculpting of the fabric pants underneath, which we don't really see, but it's nice. I think that's nice sculpting for pants. And we can see the boots there, sort of a pale Tusken wrapped ankle boot with a little bit of movement. It's kind of stiff on this character, doesn't really want to, I'm not getting a lot of movement. Sorry, I try and, can you see that? It's kind of stiff. It doesn't really want to click or do anything. I'm just getting, oh, that one clicks a little bit better. This one is very stiff. And I feel like the plastic's hitting, and I don't really want to force it beyond that point. I get to about there. So there's not a little bit of movement on this one. This one is stuck for some reason. It's not really doing much beyond the old wiggle. But to be honest, I am probably going to pose my Tusken standing up so that we get that full skirt, which I think looks really nice. A little bit of a wrinkle here because of how she was kind of all, the fabric was all neatly tucked behind her in the packaging, but that will ease out over time and it's already starting to look a bit better. And as you can see, that edge, we've got a few threads. I've already had a couple fall off, and we kind of have a V cut out in the front to show the boots. There at the front. I'm a little bit worried about how well this is going to stand up because the feet just look a little bit like they might give me issues with standing. Okay, I managed to get a reasonable classic standing pose there. She had a little bit of a wonky ankle in the packaging, so I was a little bit worried it might take a stand to get her to stand up, but I think she looks pretty cool there. So interestingly, not too much that I really want to do with the legs because I think the fabric looks best when she's standing up straight. A little bit of limited range of motion to the front, but some interesting leg poses out to the side. So let's take a look at the weapon that was included with this Tusken Raider, which is this gaffy stick here. It's got some differences and similarities to some of the other gaffy sticks that we have seen from action figures. Notably, it's kind of a classic short straight length like some of the other classic gaffy sticks, but the bladed section on the end is quite slender and elongated. It's not the classic sharp blades that we have seen, and I'll compare it to another one shortly, but I just want to see how well this character can hold it. Pretty good sculpting on the headpiece, a lot of texture here. Very small, very hard to see at this scale, but I think that looks pretty tidy. A plain flat brown paint job with silver there on the end, and we'll see how well this character is going to hold it. I like how easily her arms click up and down. I think that's nice, and we'll see how well I can get this into her hands. She holds that pretty easily. Her wrists want to sort of flick back, which is interesting. So there we go, pretty easy to get her to hold that, and I'm sure there are lots of fun ways to be able to pose her holding this gaffy stick. I'll see if I can do a bit of a two-handed pose here. If I can click that in to her hands. I'm just going to let go of the other side. I'll see, perhaps it'll be better to go in like that. I'm just fiddling, trying to get her to hold this, because it's a slightly shorter one. The Boba Fett gaffy stick is a much longer design, so I feel like that one's a little easier to pose. There we go. A little bit fiddly, but she holds that very nicely. So as I said, let's compare it to the recent Tusken Boba Fett figure, and we can see the differences in the gaffy stick. We can see, if I get them this way perhaps, we can see just how long his one is compared to hers, and that bladed end that I was talking about, we can see how much of a blade he has, and hers is very subtle. Doesn't really affect the toy, but I just thought it was interesting to see just the variances that they have introduced with gaffy sticks with the Boba Fett show. We can see sort of that they're very individualized to each character. So now that we have these two together, I can pose them, and we can see my small Tusken tribe. We can see the Tusken warrior's robes have started to shed a little bit as I'm posing her. Let's see if I can get her to stand up. Now her feet are being a little bit annoying there. I've got some threads there. So we can see that cool black robes coming through. They do appear to be made out of different fabrics. The fabric used on Boba Fett's cloak is a little bit neater along the edges. They have gone with a little bit of more of a fraying fabric here for this one, which I think fits the character design well, even if that means you do need to be a little bit more careful around that raw edge. But I think they look really cool together. I'll put up some pictures of these two posed together so we can see them side by side closer up. I really hope we are going to get a few more of these in the near future, including the chieftain and of course the young Tusken that Boba Fett meets early on in the show. I think those will be really important, and I definitely am very keen to track down that kind of Tusken army builder pack that Hasbro has released. I need to make a full Tusken tribe here, and Hasbro needs to make a bantha. I want a bantha to put in my Tusken scene. They have not released one for a while. I have the sort of one of the ones that they did many years ago. I absolutely love that one to death, and I need lots more banthas to put in my Tusken scenes. I really do hope they will give us something like that in the near future, because I think the Tusken scenes were some of the highlights from the Book of Boba Fett show, and I'm so glad to have the Tusken warrior for my vintage collection. I think she looks really cool with her staff. I'm not going to get too adventurous with her posing. I think she looks good like that. On the backing card, she is holding it in her right hand, kind of held at her side, looking very cool. I think that they always look fun when they hold a gaffi stick with two hands, so I'm glad that she holds that one very well. So all in all, I'm really happy with this figure. Some interesting articulation, but I really do like the details, and for me personally, I'm not too adventurous with my posing, so the details are what I am really looking for there. But I'm sure people will have fun playing with some of the poses for this figure. I think she looks really cool with Boba there. Now Boba's not going to stand up for me. There we go. So there you have it, the Tusken Warrior 3.75 inch figure from the Vintage Collection line. I think she looks really cool. I'm very happy with this figure. Thank you so much for watching my unboxing. Check out our other videos for more Star Wars unboxings, including ones from the Vintage Collection like Boba Fett here and that recent fabulous Darth Vader figure. Catch you in the next video, and as always, may the Force be with you. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like, check out our other videos, and subscribe for alerts about new uploads. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.